Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. Today I'm going to be doing another master study. The painting I'm going to be doing a sketch of today is this one on the left hand side. It's actually by an unknown artist and is part of the collection in the Michele and Donald DeMoore Museum of Fine Arts in Springfield, Massachusetts. I've always loved this painting. I can't even remember how I stumbled across it. I think it was probably on Pinterest. But I really love how soft and romantic the painting is. And I just think the way that this artist has painted his face, it does look to me like a self-portrait. When you see the painting a little bit larger, it does look like he's holding an easel. So this to me is very much a self-portrait. And I just love the direct gaze. I also really love the way that coarse shadow runs down his nose and across his lips and chin. And I think that's one of the main reasons why I would really like to tackle this as a drawing. I think drawing a study of a very simplified painting like this really does help you get kind of a handle on some of the aspects of drawing and how to make a compelling drawing. So this is what I wanted to tackle today. Now my last video was very kind of methodical and rigid. I'll link it in the above, but I did a tutorial on how to measure a face very specifically. Today is kind of the antidote to that. I'm not really measuring at all. I'm doing a little bit of a continuous line drawing for the underdrawing. I'm just looking at the drawing on the left hand side and just kind of doing a very loose sketch of the shapes I see in the face, just using the side of my pencil in one continuous line. Very much looking at the shapes and the relationships from the face. Now this method often results in a very inaccurate drawing, but it can be lots of fun, and you do have to do a lot of correcting on the fly. I sometimes find when I've done a lot of very rigid drawings in one specific method, I do have to kind of switch it up, otherwise I really risk getting kind of bored and stuck with my art. So I think today I just wanted to do something that was a little bit freer and a little bit looser. The drawing itself took an hour, so it didn't take too long. It was quite good fun. You can see I've done a rough sketch, and I think that things are pretty much in the right place. And I'm just going now into kind of developing a little bit of tone and a little bit of line at the same time. Now again, because I'm kind of jumping forwards and backwards, this is a little bit disorganized, so I would suggest if you're fairly new to drawing, don't really take this as a good and methodical way to approach your drawing. Do refer to one of my other tutorials. But yeah, I think the message I would suggest here is if you aren't new, or if you are new but you just want to do something different, there's nothing bad with kind of switching things up every now and then. So the parts of his face that I'm really fascinated with is this really kind of deep corner of his mouth, and some of the very sharp shadows around his nose and his chin. You can see just in the way those shadows end, it really tells you a lot about the shape of his chin and the shape of his mouth and lips, and trying to capture those elements accurately is where all the likeness comes from. I mean, obviously things have got to be in the right place, but it's so important to get those turns correct. So this is something I was really kind of enjoying noodling on a little bit. I did stop myself from diving into too much detail too early, although I do keep popping back to those core shadows around the mouth because they are so wonderful. But I did try and kind of jump in and out of developing some of the larger shapes and tones as well. I think if you focus too much on one little area, you really kind of miss out on some other aspects of the drawing. So it is important to jump around and keep your eyes fresh. I'm doing a lot of correcting on the fly here. I did initially get his jaw and his ear quite wrong, so when I kind of focused on one specific area and come back to that, I really did notice some of those errors and had the chance to go in and fix those. I would suggest if you're doing this approach then, and you do want to kind of hone in on likeness, or you're really struggling to achieve an accurate likeness, then using an overlay is something that's quite helpful here, as well as obviously taking lots of breaks. So yeah, I'll put a link above to the overlay tool I use in assessing likeness. I didn't use it in this drawing. I kind of ended up landing on actually not a bad likeness, so I didn't really feel the urge to use the overlay app here. So yeah, it wasn't something I used, but it's something I do find quite helpful. So yeah, it's just something I would recommend as a tool. I'm laying in very dark tones for his hair. I wanted to keep it a little bit rough and hatchy. As always, I think that the way to get a really interesting looking drawing is to really try and have a blend of marks. So a blend of different tones, a blend of soft and harsh, lots of hatches and smooth areas. So you really want to get as much variety as you possibly can. So I'm always thinking of variety when I'm doing these drawings. Even when they're a very small area, you want a lot of variety. And I think sometimes just kind of subconsciously having a little bit of a strategy for how you're going to approach the drawing can really pay off as well. With this one, on the left hand side, I noticed on the painting that it's almost scraped back. You can really almost see the underlying canvas. So he's painted very thinly, or perhaps painted and then scraped back the painting on the left hand side of the face to make sure those shadows are very thin, in contrast to the light side of his face, which is quite built up with paint. So for that reason, I really wanted to get some very visible hatching marks. Again, in this case, I've used some up and down hatching for the shadow of his face, but you can see I have got diagonal hatching in his hair and his shirt as well. There's no particular reason for that, it was just kind of the way I was feeling. Although I did aim for, when I was doing the background, as you can see now, I did want to get some different directional marks just to provide some contrast with the very up and down shading in his face and the very diagonal shading in his hair. So I really wanted to get a lot of variety there, which is why the background was so kind of, messy and directional. I'm doing a little bit of measuring here as well. I mean, sometimes I have a habit of getting his shoulders or the drawing's shoulders not quite right. So I did do a bit of measuring to make sure that I got those correct. He's really got, I don't know if he's exaggerated the length of his neck or it's just really that very starched collar that he's got. It looks pretty uncomfortable. I don't think I'd like to paint with this outfit on, to be honest. It looks quite constrictive. But it does look like that maybe he's exaggerated the length of his neck and some aspects of his face as well in this drawing. Now I did have a dig around and read some articles to see if I could figure out who the artist was, but they've really struggled to identify who it is. They've had a number of experts come in and look at the drawing, but they've never been able to identify the artist. So it's still a bit of a mystery really, which I think makes it the painting even more intriguing. If you're around Massachusetts, Springfield, go and have a look. I mean, this painting will be great to see in the flesh. I love the direct gaze of the model, so I think this will be a really cool one to have a look at in person. So this is definitely like a loose sketch. If you like this sketch, actually I'll link another tutorial video above where I take you through 3 exercises to get up to this sort of stage if you want to do a study like this. I think that's probably the closest one I have that breaks it down in a little bit more detail, so that might be an interesting one for you all. I was really noodling on his left hand eye. Now I have a really bad habit, if you've watched any of my videos you'll know this, I have a really bad habit of leaving out the eyes, sometimes both, sometimes just one, and I definitely did that here. I was a little bit worried of overstating his eye, and I do think I did actually end up doing that a little bit. I really like where his eye is right now, and part of me wishes I'd just stopped here and left it really understated, but I did go ahead and develop it a little bit further. The other thing I really quite like about this stage is how I've not filled in that top right hand side of the shading. I think I might go in with an eraser tomorrow and actually take that back out again, because I did complete the filling in of the background, but I think like having that white space there just looks like a really cool composition, so maybe I'll come in and take that away again. So I flipped the drawing through 180 degrees. I definitely think this is an excellent method of really checking in on likeness, especially if you aren't using a tool like overlay. I find that as soon as I do flip it upside down, everything really comes into focus for me around some of the areas I've made an error on in the tone, or where the drawing perhaps isn't quite right. It's a little bit dangerous because sometimes you fix things when things are upside down, you flip it back and you see it doesn't work, but more often than not the changes I make right now are pretty accurate. So yeah, I think doing this 180 flip is a really useful tool, and I would recommend doing it on your drawings as a quick way to kind of figure out what's wrong. So you can see here the eye's a lot more built up and it doesn't look quite as good. So I'm kind of noodling on it a bit here, but I think what I should probably have done is come in with an eraser and knocked it back a little bit. In terms of the likeness, I don't think it's that bad. I do think it doesn't look quite right. I think I've kind of not really picked up the movement of the collar around his left side of his face. That's kind of throwing the likeness off quite a lot. Maybe I've narrowed his face a little bit as well, but I think I've captured some of the mood. I do really like the way that I've captured the core shadow lines as well. I think I've done a pretty good job there. At this stage I thought the drawing was pretty good. I have come in to try and build up some of those highlights and also develop some of the contour lines around the outside of his face. I think this is kind of the stage here when you're towards the end is where I think having a lot of practice really does help at this stage, because a lot of it's just figuring out what your drawing needs. So for me, I think here I wanted to push those highlights. I also wanted to really soften the edges of the shadows where they turn into the light, and so for that I was using my blending stick to really soften those edges and make the light side of his face an even stronger contrast to the kind of hatchy dark side of his face, to his clothes, to the hatchy background. So I really wanted to develop that as a contrast, and I'm kind of smoothing out and kind of unifying his hair a little bit by kind of smudging it. So yeah, these little finishing touches that can actually take quite a long time to do, these are the things that really kind of next level your drawing. So I think sometimes it's worth actually dedicating quite a lot of time to doing these, and I guess I didn't really dedicate a lot of time to doing these, but a good sort of 15-20 minutes was on these finishing touches. And I think sometimes it's actually good to give yourself even longer, you know, give yourself a good 2 or 3 hours in the finishing phase sometimes, so that you can really push it even further, which is something I don't think I do enough, to be honest. I would quite like to do some more kind of developed finished drawings. So we're pretty much at the end of the video now. This is what the finished drawing looks like. Pretty happy with the way it turned out. I don't think the likeness is super, but I think it still captured some of the mood of the original drawing, and this was quite fun to do. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, leave a like or subscribe, and leave a comment if you've got any ideas for future videos. Thanks very much guys, bye bye.